Well, it's all they pick me up on.
Oh, my gosh.
It's summer, nobody's here.
But
In the current policy around the vacancies, we're not actually required to, publicly identify that there was a resignation.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and so part of the updates is probably stating a resignation.
Not in order.
good.
Yeah.
Or the school board meeting for Monday, July 20th. First order, pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do our mission statement. Our mission is to graduate all students with high levels of academic and personal achievement, ready for post-secondary excellence, prepared for productive, compassionate citizenship through research-based instruction and collaborative system of support. Any changes or additions to the agenda today?
Yes, so I recommend under 8.1 that we put the unfinished work session policy review, and as 8.2, that we would add a board member, notice of resignation.
All right. Thank you. Free public comment. During this portion of board meeting, members of the public are specifically invited to present items of commendation and or concern at the discretion of the board chair. Further public participation may be allowed at the time specific agenda items are under consideration by the board. Individuals viewing online, we post the upcoming agenda to our website Friday before regularly scheduled school board meetings. This will allow time for public comment prior to the meeting, which is the time provided to share your comments with the board to consider upcoming meetings. Personnel matters may not be discussed in public at a school board meeting. Members of the public who have personnel concerns or accommodations should share them directly with the district superintendent. Do we have any online comments? None. All right. Action items 4.1, approved June 15th. Regular board meeting minutes. Anybody have any questions on those? If not, I'll hear motions.
I'll move to approve the regular board meeting minutes from June 15, 2022.
And so moved. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0. 4.2, approved personnel report.
Right, tonight's personnel report is right towards the end of the year. We did have a resignation of a special education teacher at the high school, and so tonight we're recommending the hiring of Mr. Scott Bartowski for the special education teacher. He brings 8 years of special education teaching experience across Oregon and California, including experience in resource, self-contained classrooms and co-taught classrooms. He holds an Oregon preliminary licensure in both special education and elementary education, a master's degree in education, and has extensive experience developing and implementing IEPs, behavior support plans, and differentiated instruction for students with diverse learning needs. His instructional philosophy emphasizes high expectations, relationship building, collaboration, and inclusive practices, making him a strong addition to the Pleasantville special education team. Tonight is recommended the board of directors approve the personnel action for licensed employees as reflected in the resolution and the addendum presented along with this resolution. And the only category tonight is licensed hire.
All right. Thank you.
Oregon preliminary licensure, that just means like changes or something.
It depends on when you got your license with TSBC. The names continually change. Basically, he is licensed to do the job that he's being hired for in the state of Oregon.
Sounds good. Any other thoughts for anyone? All your motions?
Move to approve personnel report, resolution, 2627.07.
And so moved. All those in favor? Aye. 4-0. 4.3, accept fourth quarter enrollment report.
All right, so our fourth quarter, we actually ended up with 4 students more than we did in fourth quarter of 24-25. Down 6 in the elementary school, up 17 at the middle school, and down 7 at the high school.
Do we need to vote on this one, accepting it, or
I'd say a motion to accept it.
clear motions?
To accept the fourth quarter enrollment report, exhibit 267.008.
And so moved, all those in favor? Aye. Passes 4-0. 5.0 board communication, with 5.1 notices, annual OSBA convention in Portland, November 12th through the 14th. I already know I can get to go this year. How about you guys?
Look it over if you can, and it's not open for registration yet, so.
September.
Oh, okay.
Look it under.
It's early notice, I will check your calendars. All staff district in service, high school center September 1st, 8 to 9:30 a.m.
Yep, this is one right about it's time for choosing the board chair if somebody else wants to do it as well. So I
Feel free, I did it last year, so somebody else wants to.
got about 5 minutes, right? It's pretty short.
I was figuring out, feel like, but I don't, what did I say you were the rest of it?
What's that?
I don't remember what I said last year,
It was beautiful.
but was it?
Yeah, I didn't hear before that, so, no, Susan did, I did it.
No, I haven't done it this.
Yeah, I think for year review, we got.
How did you get out of this fight then? You were the chair.
What the heck?
Great question.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll mentally prepare for that.
Look at the graduation.
Oh, you did, that was two summer vacations, one was in that's good.
And I was off on my numbering, so Kimberly's probably 5 points, 2 for the unfinished work session,
Oh.
3 for the.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Any other business?
Well, I put the unfinished work session,
It's 5 points, I think,
Yeah.
volunteer view, okay.
it's 5.2, and order the presentation is 5.3.
Okay.
All right, so our next one is, this is an optional OSBA policy update, according to OSBA, and it is BBE vacancies on the board.
Page number on that one?
11.
Thank you.
So, let's see, I'll jump straight to the summary of significant changes. So first one is the formal declaration of vacancy. So the proposed policy begins by requiring the board to formally declare a vacancy during the public board meeting. This ensures the vacancy is officially recognized before the appointment process begins. Number 2 is establishing an application process. So the proposed policy requires an application period of at least 20 days, public notice on the district website, application instructions and deadlines available to the public, the ability for the board to extend or reopen the application period if necessary. The current policy does not establish any sort of application process. And then number 3, verification of eligibility. We would generally do this anyway through the application process. Just as it states that the applicants in the policy must be registered or in the process, be registered voters with the district and have resided in the district for at least 1 year, satisfy any zoning residency requirements which we don't have, meet statutory eligibility requirements regarding district employment. Number 4, open review of applicants. So the policy would specify that applicant materials are reviewed in an open meeting. Interviews are conducted occur in an open meeting. An appointment occurs by vote in an open meeting. Voting procedure. So the policy clarifies that the appointment requires an affirmative vote of the majority of the board. If no applicant receives a majority vote, the board may conduct additional rounds of voting or reopen the application process. And this gets really interesting if you watched any of the meetings recently across the river. Okay. Administration of oath, so you have the taking of the oath before assuming duties, and then they'd be seated immediately thereafter. And then the service of the appointee. So the oath policy simplifies the language regarding the appointee's term of service. The appointee serves until June 30th following the next election, at which time either the remainder of the unexpired term or a new full term will be be filled by election depending upon the timing of the vacancy. Language is more concise, while remaining consistent with Oregon law. So just discussion items, so length, the number one, I think is, do we want to make any changes, to the policy? If we do, then is the length of the application period, so OSB recommends a 20-day application period. That can always be reduced by board vote as well, so through resolution based on your timeline, if you want to shorten it, then there could be a motion to shorten it, notifying, you just notice that your policy is 20 days, but for the, whatever the circumstances are, you want to shorten it or even lengthen it. I think the policy allows for you to lengthen it anyway if you want to reopen it. You say if you got one applicant and you want to get more time to go out and search for additional applicants, you can lengthen it as well. Interview process. The model policy allows the board to interview selected applicants. The board may wish to discuss interviewing every qualified applicant, interviewing only finalists, using a standardized interview process. Again, reopening the application process. If no applicant receives a majority vote, the vote for the proposed policy allows the board to reopen the application process, period. And then appointment philosophy, although not addressed directly in the policy, the board may wish to discuss guiding principles for appointments such as commitment to serving all students, ability to work collaboratively, respectful for governance roles, willingness to participate in board training, commitment to district strategic plan priorities. The recommendation would be that adopting the OSBA model policy and the administrative role substantially as it is currently written. So that would provide a transparent appointment process, aligned with current law, establish consistent procedures for future boards, reduces uncertainty during vacancies, and promotes public confidence in board appointments. We'd also have an application form that goes with that, the timeline, interview questions, evaluation rubric, is a possibility, the appointment timeline, and an orientation schedule. If you want to take a quick look on page 18, this is the administrative regulation that goes with it. And this is one of the questions that we've, I think, come up with when we were pending the possible resignation of a board members, like what is the process? Do we have an application process? And we don't, so this would standardize it. As far as getting questions from the individual. And we stand with this process moving forward for look at the individual applications, have deliberation, and make motions to appoint.
The more general, but they make a more general question.
Yeah.
How long, you have to have 5 board members?
I believe that there's another policy that states that we have 5 members.
And if you have 4, how long before you have to have 5?
I don't think that's written anywhere.
So I'm not suggesting.
You would naturally come up to the next election cycle.
So are we okay to talk about specifics?
I think so.
Just, okay, so, well, I'll speak hypothetically, if somebody resigned and their term was through 27? Is that right?
Yes.
June of 27.
Yeah, or June of 27, so exactly, not even a year. Is it, I'm not recommending, is it an option to just hold out for the election and just have 4?
I believe it is, and that's all the timing of this. So if you figure that the election is in May and somebody resigns on May 30th, there would have been, I guess it would have been an election. And say that person was elected into it, then they really should have resigned.
Right.
The board would likely want to put somebody in to fill out the entire term.
Well, they'd like to, because they have to.
I need to look further into, I think, the policies as far as the governance to find out. I don't think that there's, without looking in there right now, I don't think that there's anything that would say that the board would to, I would imagine there's some more vague language around, in a timely manner, good question though.
The only reason I'm asking at this particular time, and again, I'm not making a suggestion, but it is interesting that there's, what, 9 months? And it takes some time to go through this, so you want to lose a month at least, probably more. So that is 7 months. And so you have somebody who's sitting here 7 months, and maybe they run, and maybe they don't. I just wonder if that's valuable time spent, or if it's an option, I don't know. Not saying 4 is ideal, I'm not saying we're the perfect 4 either,
There is a consideration of quorum. It's more difficult to ensure you've got a quorum.
but
Three, you know, because my understanding is even though we've only got 4 city board members, that the quorum is based on 5. And so we'd have to have at least 3 in order to get any business done, is my understanding.
There's an ORS that dictates the size of our board, there is, at least, I don't know about district policy, there's no ORS that dictates time to fill vacancy.
I'm not seeing the district policy either.
Neither, so, and then we have 4 or 5, it'd still be 3 votes to approve anything regardless. The majority of the board.
Well, being candidly from experience, is these are opportunities in which boards, individual board members can put the rest of the board in a position for, what I've seen take place is through board appointments, a board can start to ensure that the values towards their current objectives are better met before an election period, and sometimes that experience then leads to that person being elected as well.
yeah. So there obviously must not, obviously, doesn't appear there's a time frame. It's, if there's not even a requirement to have 5th, maybe then there's certainly no requirement for timing on replacing the resignation.
Correct.
So, for this sample policy now for us, if we like this, and we want to move forward with this policy, would the first read be the next meeting, and then the approval would be the next meeting after that? And then if we want to use this policy to fill a position, it wouldn't even start until after this policy is approved?
No, there's nothing in our current policy that says we cannot. So the current policy is written very,
So we can still do all this stuff, even though it's not technically policy, but no, that isn't we have to.
correct.
Okay.
We would do some sort of this anyway.
Right, sure.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
This provides the rules, and so when it does happen, we're not sitting around going, what did you
Yeah,
do?
right, next time, yeah.
Is I don't know the answer, but if you have an applicant or some applicants and you don't like it, then I mean, I know what it says here, if you only get 1, you want to put it out and whatever, but what if you just don't like it?
Keep in mind, there's nothing to preclude said folks from running an election, they don't like the right.
Oh,
9 months, you have
Yeah.
control.
Yeah,
Sure.
so if this becomes your policy and somebody were to apply, we would, for transparency, we would need to have a meeting in which that application would come to the board for review. So we'd have it on the agenda, you guys would review it. Drew would then come to a point where he's like, do we have a discussion, you don't want to say anything, and say, for example, everyone just stays completely silent. And he says, okay, not having any discussion, does anyone want to make a motion? And nobody says anything.
Right.
And then he's left with hearing the motions, moving on to item discussion as far as what you want to do, which, you know, might be board communication. Yeah,
application period or whatever.
application. At some point, I think it's just being able to do that, you know, hearing none, then do we want to reopen the application? What's the discussion? You know, the other situation we run into is we have two applicants. You've got four out here, and you do.
Sure.
Like another.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So something we'd like to move forward with, this is one of the options.
Well, I guess, yeah, when you guys think of this policy, the update. I think that, yeah, it looks good to me. It clarifies, it makes it more clear what needs to happen in the future. But yeah, I think as, bring it back as written for next time.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's important, is then obviously the first read is where you see the first nine as far as all written together in one. If you don't like it at that point in time, just we take it back and based on discussion. Do another right or seek OSBA guidance in another right based on what the sentiments are. Keep bringing it back.
Okay, so again, with regard to the current situation, this is 100% on the board, deal with what we're gonna do, right? This is not your problem.
Well,
I mean, what I realize is, we're not reaching on you to do anything, in terms of our decision around what to do around the board.
no, we will advertise it as you guys tell us to advertise it. If it's, what I'm hearing though is like the rules that we've got in place right now. So I think for tonight is, we'll finish, we'll have the declaration of it. And at that point in time, if somebody would like to say, listen, we'd like to actually continue with the process as outlined in the review of the policy, you would give us guidance within all that. Yeah.
But we haven't done that yet.
All right. Good. On the
Otherwise, again, if you're seeing and watching, we're getting a lot of lessons from across the river. Yeah. The process, one of the governance and ethics complaints that they've got against them right now, where the board member that just resigned, specific to how they filled the temporary superintendent's position. And there's also some issues about, I think, just in regard to how, I know in turn there was questions around how the board vacancy came about and whether or not they needed to do that publicly or not as well.
Well, didn't she resign and say never mind, I'll go back,
Yes, and then resigned again.
and everybody here.
Yeah.
well,
I
okay.
guess that might have had to do with the timing as far as, making a complaint as well, so.
It's not so dramatic here. On 5.3. We have a notice of resignation.
Oh, no, we got two more policies yet.
What? Oh, we're doing all policies? I thought we were just doing that policy.
There's only 4 of the 12.
Okay.
Okay, do work for the night. So this one's to do with, this is a highly recommended one, it's BD, board meetings, notices, and communication. What it does, I'll give you the abridged version of what the policy would do is it would provide greater definition around the types of meetings. And how we're having it. So the one is definitions, the communicating, convening, decision-making progress, deliberation, executive session, so on and so forth. Number 2, the types of meetings, which we already do, but again, we have a policy, so we get regular meetings, special meetings, emergency meetings. Emergency meeting would be an example when we had the ice storm. If I needed authorization to spend money or use reserves, then we would come back in an emergency meeting. And the requirement as far as notice is much less. But work sessions and executive sessions, work sessions, so it better defines work sessions as planning, receiving information, preliminary discussion, and board deliberation. Communication outside of board meetings. A lot of things I think covers, and the reason I brought this forward is it covers a lot of the questions that we have as far as how we operate anyway, and this provides more details in writing. Number 5, electronic communication. Revised policy continues the district's existing practice of including a cautionary statement on emails, exchange among board members. Reminder reinforced that electronic communications may constitute public records. Electronic communication may inadvertently become a conflict of interest, require engagement discussion. The meeting locations and accessibilities, public notice requirements, all things that we already do. Just for this, some of the original policy, how complaints are handled. Discussion on items discussion on items. The model identifies several optional provisions that require board consideration. So A is translation service. Model allows districts to include language regarding translation services when requested sufficiently in advance. We already have to use some of that when we send out a notice. Firearms at board meetings, although it includes optional language prohibiting firearms and dangerous weapons at board meetings, it's authorized by law. Mandatory public meeting law training. There's language requiring board members to attend the public meetings law training consistent with Oregon law. So recommendation is adopting the state model policy is substantially written. And then also further recommends that the board continue its longstanding governance practice of using work sessions primarily for discussion, planning, education, and policy review over serving formal action for regular board meetings, except in circumstances required otherwise. The recommended next steps would be just put together the final review. Sorry, the first read. You notice it will go in a lot more detail, which for me, I think just answers the questions that I think a lot of us have had. Takes what is essentially, I think right now, a 2.5-page policy and adds a lot more detail to it. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages. The last one is BDC executive session. This again is highly recommended. The significant changes, so it's much like the other ones, so there's clarified procedures for convening executive session. So the policy explains the executive session meetings is part of the regular, special, or emergency meeting. Conducted with a separately noticed executive session and noticed in accordance with board policy BD and regular public meetings law. Similar to the processes that we already follow, but again, further details those in the policy. They would provide a statement of opening statements. So the script reminds attendees that representatives of the media may attend when authorized by law. Executive session discussions are confidential. No one is to be executive session. The board return to open session when appropriate. Again, it's that standardization of having that every single time, rather than kind of waiting until we're in a really difficult situation and media shows up. And we don't even have something prepared, or we're just stating it because it's in a more of a heightened to be into that regular process of just stating it every time. Expanded executive session purposes. Current policy lists the additional statutory reasons for executive sessions. Revised policy adds recently authorized purposes, including safety of governing body members, staff, volunteers, and public facilities, cybersecurity infrastructure, and responses to security threats. Personnel executive session. It adds additional guidance regarding executive sessions involving personnel matters. So it clarifies that discussions regarding compensation generally may not occur in a personnel executive session authority. Written notice must be provided to affected employees before certain personnel executive sessions, and employees retain the right to request an open hearing provided by law. Litigation executive session. It clarifies that legal counsel must be present during executive sessions held for consultation regarding current or anticipated litigation. It reinforces the attorney-client privilege. Recordings, meetings, and confidentiality. It requires executive session minutes and states that discussions are confidential. Expands this section by clarifying recordings of minutes must be maintained in accordance with state law. Recordings of minutes are confidential unless disclosure is required. And board members, district employees, media representatives are instructed not to disclose executive session information except as authorized by law. So discussion items if necessary, so use of OSBA executive session script, that is really a helpful thing to have. We don't go to executive session very often, but having that consistent scripts is important. Annual executive session training, because executive session requirements will continue to evolve through legislation, important decisions, administration recommends incorporating a brief annual executive session training or refresher in the board's governance calendar. And this could be as simple as the review that we do, so sending out the board policies for board members to review on their own time. And I think that if we want to bring that back as a group, to further discussion, we can always bring that back to the group as well. Confidentiality expectations. So executive session confidentially protects employees, students, attorney-client communication, collective bargaining, litigation, and district security. Recommendation for me is adopting those big policies substantially as written. And like the other one, it just provides a lot more detail. 15 years ago, the details weren't as important or needed. Things have shifted. And the last one is policy CCC, this is hiring of licensed administrators. This is not necessarily, this is not prompted by change in Oregon law or the school association policy updates. It's intended to provide the board to discuss its governance expectations following the recent conversations regarding the hiring process for administrative positions. So the background is your policy CCC establishes the district process for hiring licensed administrators below the position of superintendent. Currently, the policy provides that existing district administrators will be notified of administrative vacancies and may apply for the position. The superintendent may determine that administrative vacancy will be filled through an internal transfer. And if the superintendent is not selecting an internal transfer, the district conducts a competitive hiring process that includes public posting, screening, interviews, and recommendation to the board for appointments. So essentially it provides two different pathways for filling administrative vacancies. Governance discussion. So recent appointment of licensed administrator prompted discussion regarding whether the current policy appropriately reflects the board's expectations. One perspective expressed during the discussion was that competitive recruitment process provides the greatest opportunity to identify the strongest candidates by allowing multiple qualified individuals to compete for the position. At the same time, the current district policy recognizes that there may be circumstances in which an internal transfer is the district's best interest. The question before the board is not whether the previous hiring decision was appropriate, but rather the question is whether the existing policy continues to reflect the board's expectations for future administrative hiring decisions. The rest of it's pretty self-explanatory. From a superintendent's view, so my recommendation would be that the board continues with its current policy that it appropriately balances two important governance principles and provides superintendents sufficient flexibility to effectively manage the district and leadership's team. Ensures the administrative vacancies are filled through a process that reflects the board's expectations for transparency, competition, and selecting the strongest candidate available.
Questions, thoughts? people.
I have mixed emotions about it. The policy as it's written makes sense to me. I don't have a problem with it. I understand and appreciate the flexibility that the superintendent wants and sometimes needs. However, I also understand the desire to go out to market, so to speak. And I guess my tendency is to assume that the superintendent is in a better place than I am to decide whether the market might have somebody better than is already available at a term. But I lean towards the policy as it is. But I get the other side of it. But I lean towards the way that we have it.
Your thoughts from anyone else?
I like option B, it keeps it flexible, it doesn't, in the end, any one way or the other, but I can. Communicates interest in doing what needs done to get the best candidate that we can. While not cutting off superintendent's legs to make the proper decision. I agree with Rusty. So a set of information that is ours.
And so your reference is A, B. So,
So how, I'm wondering how indeed, how circumstance would warrant an exception.
if we went with B,
If we had the, and there was an exception we wanted to consider, what would that be? Why wouldn't we go to market if?
I think some of it's leadership style. So we worked with multiple superintendents and been involved with multiple administrative hirings. I've seen it where internal candidates have just been placed. I've seen it where we have had internal openings for, say you've got 3 elementary principal openings. We would have 3 separate interviews at 3 separate buildings. I've seen it where we do a pool, and out of that pool, there's representatives from each of the buildings, and then there's like fitting of the puzzle where you feel like the best fit might be. I've seen it where we go through the process and you run through it and you make a recommendation, or you might make a top 2 recommendations, and in the end, the superintendent chooses anyway. And so a lot of it is studying the leadership style as far as how that works through. It's a little bit of a, the last one is a little bit of a dangerous, when you're trying to keep, I like to be upfront in the process, to be able to say the process is going to look like X, so that everyone knows that that is what the process is going to look like. And if we run out of X and we still don't have a good fit, then we will reestablish what the next process will be. I think it's usually in bad faith if you either don't define it or you lead people to believe that the process can look like something, and in the end it changes. Because circumstances changes, people drop out, people withdraw. You may get a last minute person to put their hat in the ring for it they didn't expect to get in doing it. The other piece, I think, as far as my experience, what it just told me is I've seen districts go out and look for a really competitive process. They want to search across the entire nation. And in my experience, those have led to some of the worst hires that we've ever experienced. And the idea is that we open that up to the groups and we go through a really solid process from the outside as far as saying we've got a diverse group of people, we've got multiple interview presentations so that people have different eyes on it. And out of that, we end up with a person that we think would fit the district, that are new to the district, in the sense that sometimes you will often see that this pendulum changes. So like when I decide that I'm done, the board will get together and say, these are the things we liked about Jim, these things we didn't like about Jim. And you often see kind of this pendulum swing, like we start to search for the things we wanted that Jim didn't do well, we want to fill that gap. And sometimes that pendulum swings a really long ways as well. Not always. Sometimes it's a good part as well. A lot of them have been really bad hires, so the person sticks around for 2 years, the person doesn't even change their license plate on their cars from the other state that they were in, and then after 3 years leaves, never moves their family to the area. Sometimes you never know.
But just so I'm clear, because I'll speak out of both sides of my mouth here. Even in B, where we've gone out and recruit, ultimately, it's still your call who you hire.
Correct.
So that pendulum you're talking about is, you're probably not gonna get
You're the
swarmed.
balance.
Yeah,
Well, to an extent,
Yes, with the exception though is, I can only speak for myself. I'm not likely to go into a process. I would be very likely to go into a process and say, okay, let's put together. Either I'm leading it, and in many cases, if it's for a principal position, I may lead some of it, depending who we have in the district that may or may not be able to lead it. But put together a group of people to be able to come together that's gonna work closely with the person, the principal in this case, and say, give me some of your qualifying characteristics that you'd like to be able to see, your traits that you'd like to be able to see in this person. And from that, I can build a posting, I can build interview questions, that will lead us towards those traits. At some point in time though, I'm gonna sit back, I'm not gonna be involved with the actual interview process, I'm gonna let the first groups that have been that, because I'll have an influence in doing that. And so in stating that, what I'm saying is, provide to me your top recommendations, even though I may not even totally agree remotely with your 2 recommendations, and trust that I'm going to believe in you in finding those 2 individuals, of which then I will make a recommendation of 1. You just run that risk of like, I may not even agree with them, I'm going to go to the 3rd person anyway. Ultimately, if it is a bad decision and it is not a fit, and the staff is, and the students and community, you just will not accept the person, I'm the one that has to fix that.
well, so I guess, that all makes sense, but another option, because you kind of did that. I mean, in terms of you sought feedback, what would be the criteria, what would you want to see in the principal? And you asked the question, my understanding. And you would still ask that question if you were in the recruitment process, so none of that would change, you just wouldn't have to, you wouldn't have to do anything different, other than you'd have a larger pool to choose from. Right, I mean, what I'm saying is you could go to, out there could be 11 people applying, just like anyone,
Correct.
and you still hire a person in a higher.
Yes. Yeah, it's just a matter of, if that's the direction that I know I'm going to already head, and this again, this kind of leadership, I think, style as well. I'm gonna be upfront with people, this is what, I'm coming to you to get feedback regarding this person as an internal hire. If you're on board, or if you need to ask questions that need to be answered, let's go through this internal process first. Before we go out. The process would change slightly if I had multiple people, which you were just a small district, you know, running this right, if I had like 3 people that said, okay, we're interested in this internal, I'm not likely to follow that same practice, process at that point in time. If I felt comfortable, yes, one of these 3 people I would hire, let's go through the actual interview process instead of having we run the internal interview process. Very unlikely in the size of the district that we have. There were circumstances in this particular case when we initially hired Alan. We specifically went out and looked for somebody with experience in instruction. We weren't necessarily looking for a
When you hired for the AT, not.
correct. Right, we knew that Chris was in this last year. They gave us a year basically to to look deeper. The other piece of internal candidacy, having gone through it many times, is I believe the most difficult road there is to getting a position.
Is that again?
The internal candidate
Yeah.
is the most difficult road to go as far as getting a position internally. You've already made decisions in which people have made first impression.
Right.
Yeah, you've disappointed people already.
Is it appropriate to ask right now what the process for the APU replacement look like?
Helen ran that. So it was similar to the process that's outlined in the current policy as far as an external posting, recruiting through our application process, and then putting together an interview team. He actually then took it one step further and had those individuals come back and do the finalists and do an in-person response type of interview. And I forget exactly what it was, but I think he had a group of students that was available that set up an interview time. And I believe he also then had some coaches that dealt with his parents as well that were there that they had to make a presentation to, and then took that information before making a recommendation to me. He follows that same process with his teaching staff as well. So all the candidates that were finalists came back and actually did like a lesson with the students.
Were there multiple candidates for the APU job?
There were, yeah.
Just going through Andy.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at it. Between A and B or C, it's effectively taking power away from Jim and giving it to the board. So it's giving us decision making over the level that he's hiring for. I mean, when I look at it, our ultimate responsibility is to hire Jim in that position and then to give him guidance on how we feel the district's doing, functioning, but then it's his job to hire principals at that level underneath that, at his discretion, and we give feedback on if we think that's appropriate or not. But if we go B or C, it kind of puts power back in our hands where he's coming to us asking permission to do things.
I don't see the B because I'm asking permission for anything.
Well, if he wants to hire someone internally first without going outside, he has to ask his permission to do that.
Where does it say that?
It says that it encourages recruitment as preferred practice, while allowing the superintendent to recommend an exception when circumstances warrant. So he would have to come to us and say, I recommend that we make an exception here, hire internally. That's how I'm reading it. Is that not what that's saying? Or,
What do we do it again?
so B, under B, it's essentially saying you should post for every position unless you feel like an internal hire is better, in which you would want to come to us and ask to do an internal before posting, and you have to get our permission essentially.
Correct, as it's currently set up and the way that I've done it, it wasn't so formal in replacing for Deborah's position. As I had individual conferences with individuals, so for instance, at that point in time, I viewed the only person legitimately able to move into the elementary principal position would have been Whitney, and I knew Whitney was not interested, and so I didn't go beyond searching for that. Chris was an interim. Caleb was in his first year, and Kyle, I believe, was still in his first year, and so we moved straight into the second one. But I always started with the internal process first.
Right, but under B, it's saying you should basically start with external, unless if you had an idea that you want to do internal, you would have to come to us first and ask for an exception.
Yeah, I think I would do similar to what I did last time, to be able to say, okay, I sent out an email saying, here's what I'm considering doing in this particular situation. Do you have any feedback or concerns? And hearing that, I went forward with the actual process. Right now, I would do something similar here. I would start with the recruitment process, and if it was going to vary off of that, then I would send out a message and saying, here's what I feel like the process would be. Is there any questions or concerns to address? Yeah, sure, I think you're right. I think it kind of reverses the current policy.
I would take out recommend and put the word make in there. Allowing the superintendent to make an exception on circumstances warrant.
Oh, so he can do it on his own.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So like that should still be his thought process is to think external, but if we see someone internal who he wants to hire, he can just make that call, so.
Yeah, and then I get the Jim's our one employee that we review, and it's hard for us to hold him accountable for the hiring process, and I'm on board with that, but it's a little bit like the OSAS data, right? Like, if we get 6 months into a school year, and I mean, we had a situation where there was a change mid-year, and it's not that it can't happen, but right, like, we have 6 months of turmoil, and then it just becomes a bigger thing. So, I mean, that's my hesitation on that, like, yeah, so that's just drop a little bit accountable, but or avoid problems. If possible.
Mhm.
Not that this is a cure-all for anything by any means.
I think with these positions, and not all of them, but I think this is that was a big position in terms of the influence that position has over a school. And I think that's hard to say it received more attention than the elementary principal did, but the elementary principal, we did a different process, right? We had a much larger process as far as filling that position. I think you do start to see that when there's many people in the community that wait to see the direction in which something is going to go, and then when they see that going and they think it should go somewhere else, they start to provide input. That input, though, is very seldom ever public input, it's individual input. And in most cases, it is specific to an individual's intentions, or an individual who may have somebody else that they know holds a license that they've convinced to apply for a position that for some reason never applied. So there's always some sort of individual intention that is not necessarily aligned with the objectives of the district. at a particular time. It serves a particular individual's intentions.
Veiled concerns over a decision being made.
Yes. As far as either a perception of maintaining something that they think exists or moving towards something that they'd like to see exist. Generally influenced by athletics.
Runs every school.
And athletics guy.
Thoughts? Or if we change the word to recommend, something else, make.
I still prefer
That is something that we take an official vote on.
Well, I mean, we would want to give him guidance on which policy we want him to bring forward.
Right, that's what I'm
street. So which one of these, yeah.
Right.
No, I guess it doesn't have to be an
This one was-
official vote. It won't have to be a vote. It would just be, I don't know.
It would only be a motion if we wanted to change.
Yeah.
From the current policy, I see.
At this stage, you could take a poll. If you're saying like, okay, A and B are two top, let's discuss C. You could have a question of, is there anyone interested in C? By hearing none, who would be interested in A, or who would be interested in B?
Well,
Like, kind of engaged on that.
yeah, right. So this anybody have any interest in C? Guess we don't would be interested in that, no, okay, so between A and B. So A is the current policy, we would only need a motion if we wanted, like, vote to change it to B, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so that could be the question is, you could take a poll as far as what is interested in changing from the current policy to B.
Yeah, okay.
And then take what is captured in here and come back with a first draft.
Right, okay.
Like, basically, it's a new
policy,
policy,
right.
switch it around. Yeah.
Okay,
I have one more comment before we get this full.
sure.
I'm trying, it's just dawning on me now, but it's not always gonna be Jim that we're dealing with.
Sure.
And I don't really know what that means, but other than it's not always gonna be the same relationship.
Can I put words in your mouth?
It's not,
You're saying that under our current situation, there's a high level of trust, that may not always exist. Yeah, I appreciate that.
We can also say that I've experienced more, open recruitment process that did not end in great results.
And that would be, I know at least one superintendent who had written in her contract that she was solely responsible for the process for hiring her administrators. For me, I could operate under both one, you guys are providing, I think, space for that. I think regardless of whether the wording would be recommend or make, I don't imagine I would change my processes as far as giving you guys the information here. When I'm looking, do you have any considerations or concerns or, that's just the, I think the communication and governance that you need to have in order to move forward and making decisions like that. I think Jen's right though, and I've seen boards where they have had resolutions as far as what are the operating procedures that they have followed, not necessarily policy, but just resolution for operating procedures as well. Like they've come up with something that was very specific to them as a board and how they governed, and they want to make sure that continued, and they would pass resolutions to be able to do that as well, so.
the process to replace every was open and decided.
So the last part again.
The process when everybody left was external and very pretty.
my point was, from my experience, was there was a lot less trust, in the superintendent board relationship. There was a more open process and still did not have. Just didn't move it, I mean, that's pretty disastrously.
No matter which way you go, there's always the potential for good things. It's really just small.
Yeah.
steps.
That's essentially my, right.
Can I ask you, here's the jump spot, you go rewind back to our situation here, and if policy B was in place. Would you have come to the board with a strong recommendation for an internal hire before you went out to recruitment? Is that how that would have gone?
Yes, I think you're seeing the same thing. I am considering wanting to do an internal placement.
Okay.
Here's the reasons why. The first thing I would do is start with meeting with staff. The only reason you would hear from me again is if that didn't go if that went sideways, they didn't want to. They'd get behind it. Because at that point in time, when having conversations with the individual that expressed interest to say, listen, the timing is not right now, here's what I'm hearing. Love to have you stick around in the current position that you're in and continue to grow that person in that position and go the other direction.
I mean, at the end of the day, the way these written, it just kind of gives the board notification earlier of your thought processes on potential hire.
Yeah, and that maybe we explore putting that in policy, that as a policy, the superintendent will inform the board of the direction that they're going before. It's just,
Like before you start the recruiting process.
and that's what you're talking about, I think an ongoing policy, no matter who your superintendent is, that it ensures that the board is going to be informed of what that process is, or what they're thinking before time.
Just like, oh, I think I'm a good internal candidate, I'm gonna pursue that, or is it okay with that? Or I think I'm gonna go outside on this one, I don't see any good internal candidates, that kind of thing. Just before the process begins.
Yeah, I think we all would agree, now the way in which we might get there, we would all agree that a competitive process should result in better outcomes. I think that is a good model to have for a school district, for a teacher that's working in the classroom as well. At the same time, I think we also didn't have to understand that if we have an internal candidate and we want to run an external process and then put that internal candidate into that mix, we have to realize that internal process, that internal candidate is taking the tougher road.
Sure.
And that's when we get into the conversation, and what is the feedback that we're getting from the external community and as they try to influence the process, which I think is what coming into the district, what I could read, there was a lot of influence on our processes for hiring.
Yeah, I mean, I would, after all that discussion, I would almost like go for option B, where it just says something along the lines of, you know, notify the board when a superintendent or not superintendent, principal type position available. Notify the board if you're gonna go internal or external ahead of time, and then, or get feedback from the board. And then proceed as you see fit, kind of thing.
Yeah, one of that.
Me too.
Come back with another.
Yes.
Now,
Now, this is a notice.
other business.
Other business?
Sorry,
No, I'm free.
I'm free still.
Five.
Oh, yeah.
Is work communication notice.
yes.
You want me to do it or you to do it? Oh, well, I always don't let talk, so if you want to talk.
And here's my suggestion, and I think this is some of the training that we're going through as we start to work together as far as even Robert's Rules of Orders. Our policy state that we use the kind of small district or smaller abridged version of Robert's Rules of Orders, where you don't always have to have a second, depending on, I think, the implications of the policy. And there are times where you could actually state without, the board chair could state without objection, I move that we accept the resignation of Mr. Oldham as by the board. Having heard none.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I still don't really know what I'm doing, but I'll just give it a go. So today we received the resignation of John Oldham. Board member who served with us for 19 years. Done a basic job, been great serving along here. I've been serving with him and learned so much over the years. But I hope you guys have as well. Do you have any objections to his resignation request we received? Hearing none.
Except with gratitude.
Yeah. Hearing none, the board accepts his resignation with much gratitude and sincere gratefulness. So,
And on that same note, and I think as part of that is, would you like to provide some direction to Kimberly and I to begin the process for finding another applicant, or would you like to put that on the next board meeting agenda for discussion as far as timeline and?
That would be my preference.
I agree, probably for the best.
Very good.
And I'm now the longest tenured board member. Weird, considering how things were when I started.
There you go.
I mean, you're talking about is 19 years, so that was low end for everybody else.
Oh,
And I
joint.
got elected, yeah. It's crazy.
All right, with that, next board meeting, we'll start with the work session at 5:30 here, and then board meeting at 7 on August 24th. That we're adjourned.